Welcome, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Goldstein, the president of MAS. Thank you for joining us today for this virtual gallery talk on Sally Davies' Inside Out, the latest exhibit on view in MAS's Doris C and Alan J. Freedman Gallery. Before we begin, I'd like to direct your attention to the chat where MAS staff has placed some helpful tips about including information about closed captioning for today's program. If you need any assistance during the event, please feel free to message MAS using the chat function. Throughout the event, we also invite you to use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to ask questions about Sally's work. We will answer those questions throughout the event, plus at the end of the program. Davies' Inside Out uniquely explores the city, offering glimpses into personal spaces and narratives behind closed doors, skillfully capturing the intersection of exterior urbanality and rich interiors that define New York City. Now I'm thrilled to introduce Sally Davies. Sally Davies is a photographer whose work are in the permanent collection at the Museum of the City of New York and the New York City 9/11 Memorial Museum. She is the author of 2 photo books, New Yorkers and California Dreamers, and also the acclaimed McDonald's Happy Meal Project that's had 1.75 million online hits. Her archive is now part of the downtown collection of the Fales Library at NYU, and her photographs have been featured in the New York Times, the Guardian, the New York Post, the UK Daily Mail, PDN Online, Huffington Post, and Photo Life magazine. In 2014, Sally's Lower East Side photographs were exhibited at the Bernard Ducci Maisel Gallery in New York City, with a second solo exhibition of large-scale photographs, New York at Night, that followed in 2015. Sally has exhibited twice at the Museum of the City of New York. In 2020, her street photography was included from Stuyvesant to Sid Vicious. And in 2023, her New Yorkers at Home portraits were included in New York Now Home. In 2014, Sally received a citation from the City of New York for her ongoing commitment to photographing the Lower East Side. She took Allen Guinness's old apartment when she moved from Canada to New York in 1983, and she has just returned to New York City with her dog, Bun. Sally will share her work with you, and then I will rejoin her again to have a conversation with her and also to share your questions with her. Welcome, Sally, and we look forward to hearing more about your work.
Hi, thanks. Okay, I think we're going to have a little run through for all of you lovely people who showed up for this. And I'm going to give you my life story, the Cliff Notes, while these fly by. That first photo is just important because that yellow caddy is parked in front of Allen Ginsberg's old apartment, which turned out to be a very important thing for me later on in my life. But anyway, so I moved to New York in 1983 to finish college from Canada, which is where I'm from. And I was doing a painting major and a photo minor. It was kind of fun because nobody cared about anything I was taking pictures of. So I got to just go out and learn to be a decent photographer without anybody telling me what to do. Excuse me. Unfortunately, by around the late 90s, I had an enormous collection of fantastic street photos from the East Village, and they all got lost in a fire. So at that point, I had to decide to scrap everything or keep going, and I decided to keep going. So somehow around, I don't know, maybe 2010, 2012, I hurt my back quite badly. And I had to buy a tiny little camera that I could carry around. And that kind of really started my street photography on purpose thing. So I did that and just kept doing that and photographed everywhere I went with that little camera. And I would like have my eye on a building and I would go back to shoot it and it would be gone. And that happened a few times and I started to understand that I really had to get busy here because life as I knew it was being dismantled. Someone once said to me, it's not New York that I miss, it's my youth. And I'm not sure if that's not true for me too. But photography, I don't know, photography has served so much more to me than my paintings. I think it's not as isolating. I'm out there doing it. And I also think being from Canada and not being an American has, sort of determined, my photos and what I'm taking. I think, for an example, Robert Frank, he was not an American either, and yet he did The Americans and gave us that book. So there's something to be said for a fresh eye. Metal gates that cover storefronts at night. We didn't have that in Canada. Burglar bars on all the windows. Just so many visuals that I had never had before. And as I always say, you either fall in love with moonlight on a garbage bag or you don't, and you just keep moving. Anyway, at a certain point, I was very lucky that NYU Fales Library took my entire archive for their permanent collection. You get to be 60 years old and you start to go, what's going to become of all my work? Is it going to be a doorstop in somebody's garage? And so that was very important to me that happened. And not too long after that, the Museum of the City of New York started collecting my street work as well, which was monumental also for me. And to sort of segue into the portraits from these street photographs, I don't know, sometime around 2019, maybe after Fales Library and after the museum, I started to feel strongly that I wanted to leave behind with that work some stories of the people that lived in those places and not just the buildings. So I talked to a couple of friends and everybody was all gung-ho, and I went and bought a new lens. And I got a couple of volunteers and I started, and that was it. I just started going to people's houses. I didn't know who or how I was going to get enough people to keep doing this, but it was sort of amazing. Within a week, I had about 50 people who had all reached out and said they wanted to be in the book. So I thought, okay, this is going to be fun. I guess I did that for about 2 years. And honest to God, I could have spent 10 years just on my street because every single person in this city has the most amazing place where they live. And they have the most amazing story, even though nobody thinks they do. So I started these portraits, and I had worked with a publishing company, Ammonite, in the UK on another book on my street work. And they saw a few of these and really liked them and said, let's do a book. So that's how New Yorkers came about. I was very lucky that came to me so effortlessly. So they had a quick publishing date on that. And so I had to really hustle, and I got it all done and I handed it in. And about a week and a half later, the city shut down for COVID. So it was just a gift from the universe to have had that done before COVID. Anyway, it got put on the shelf and I thought, well, that's going to be the end of that. But then they changed their mind about a year into COVID and decided to do the book. And they did. So that was that. And the book did very well. Again, like I said, I could do 10 more of these books. They were so much fun. And eventually I decided to do another book, and I headed west to California, and I did California Dreamers. Same book, different people, different apartments, different lives. But that came out a year ago, I guess, a year and a half ago, and that did very well also. So now I don't know what's next, but very proud to have both of these books under my belt. And I hope that everybody really likes them.
Well, thank you. These images are so amazing, and I want to dive in and talk to you a lot more about them because I'm sure our audience will be super interested. So I want to talk to you a little bit about that transition from Canada to New York and whether there was something in particular. I love your phrase about falling in love with the moon on a garbage bag. That so we've all had that experience.
Not for everyone.
Not for everyone, that's right. But I'm interested in what you saw in New York and, obviously different time in your life, but what was it about the New York aesthetic? Was it that chaos or what that intrigued you?
I was going to college. I left school when I was 15. So I did not go to high school. And then I went back to college as an adult student. And I did 2 years of that in Toronto and was bored out of my mind. And I was going to quit. And the director was like, no, don't quit. Just give me some time. So he came back to me and said, how would you like to move to New York? We have a campus there. And I was like, really? He's like, yeah, why not? So I said, okay. So 2 weeks later, I had $800 in one box with a couple of pots and, set of sheets and a note from my mom. And I came to New York to do 3 more years of college there.
Wow.
So I had never been here before. And I'm sure like everybody, the visuals of this city are just not like anywhere else. I didn't know if I should be terrified or if I should be, thrilled or, and I ended up moving to the East Village just by fluke. I was working at a restaurant and a nice fella that became a very good friend of mine was living down in Ginsberg's apartment. And there was some weird drug deal went down and his roommate had to move out. It was this big drama. And he came to work the next day and he said, would you like to move in to the apartment? And I hadn't even been there or seen it. And I said, yeah, it's cheap. I'll take it. And then I, went down there and it was like, oh my God, what have I done? It was like the end of the earth in those days. 1983 on Avenue B. I mean, you can't even. We had no front door in our building because the drug dealers took it off so people could, and it wasn't just my building, it was the whole neighborhood, right, at that time. So I was doing photography already through school, but it was a bit dodgy because walking around down there with a camera was not for the weak of heart. So I had to just kind of, I figured it out sort of, but now I wish I knew now then, and I would go back and redo it. But yeah, so I just think it was just walking around and I wasn't not sure if it was in awe or trauma, but just the visualness of where I was. And I thought, I have to get out of here. Like, this is not for me. I don't know who this is for. And I stayed for 40 years and I'm still living in New York. So I guess, I don't know if I grew into it or, but it was thrilling. I would go out and take these pictures and I'm like, I am not from here. I have never seen anything like this. Nobody is going to believe that I'm going to show this to them. So, whatever.
And did it influence your painting too?
No, but vice versa. My painting has always been very steady and sort of, I'm on top of that in a certain way, but my painting influences still my photography. I mean, lots of people have said, oh, this looks like a painting. I had studied color theory. That was my major at college. So when I look through my camera, I guess I am seeing paintings, whatever that means,
Well, I love your sense of color. And I wondered actually what the relationship between the painting and the photographs is, because obviously your eye is drawn to certain, even in the dark images, the relationship of the textures and the colors seems very powerful to me. And I wonder how you carried that. Obviously, photography is a very different medium, but there must be connections for you between the two.
Well, totally. I mean, I think my painting informs still my my photography. You know, you go to school for 5 years to study, you know, you go, I studied painting, but it's so much more than that. You study composition, you study content, you study balance. It's a color balance. It's all those things. And thankfully, you know, I don't have to think about that anymore. But, you know, people always say, I could tell you were a painter, or these are so painterly. So I don't know.
Mhm. Do you still paint?
I do.
Wow.
I do. I absolutely, you know, I go back and forth. It's not too often that I'm doing them at the same time because they're so different. But when I get tired and, you know, I'm not feeling the love, I just kind of switch over and then I can get rejuvenated again. Mhm.
That was such a fascinating story about, I mean, I can see why you were captured by the street photography. But it's such a fascinating story about the portraits and why you started to do those and how many people were interested in that. I mean, that's a really remarkable story that so many people sort of showed up on your doorstep, so to speak.
Shocking.
Yeah. Well,
Shocking. Very
a
shocking.
neighborhood network, right?
Well, it
That
started like
showed
that.
up.
You know what happened? I think the first couple of people that I did, thankfully I knew them and they were very kind, but they didn't really know what to expect, nor did I. And I had brought lights with me, you know, not a lot, but enough. And I realized right away that setting up lights, and I had brought someone with me as an assistant, ruined the whole thing. People were at home and it was all kind of groovy. And all of a sudden they were like, what is now what? And this is going up and what, you know, so that was it. So I went and bought a flash after that. And that was just perfect. I was in and out. Like some people, I was not kidding, in their house or their loft for like 5 minutes. I just walked in.
Wow.
This is amazing. You sit over there, boom, because I had the lighting figured out.
Mhm.
So it was quick before anybody got nervous or, you know, yeah.
Yeah, you read some of the work, some of the encounters that other photographers have had with people who are sitting for them, and those are very intense
It can be.
experiences.
Yeah.
Did you have any intense experiences with any of these folks, or did you make them feel comfortable quickly enough that was?
You know, the thing for me is that I had everything so down. I was in and out so fast that probably but an hour later they were nervous. But
Yeah.
while I was there, that, you know, I don't know. I thought people were really great. It was
Mhm.
really you know, I didn't tell anybody what to wear. I didn't tell in it as much as possible, I let them sit where they wanted to sit unless it was going to be a crappy photo, but mostly yeah. And you know, like I had one guy came to the door in a mismatched pajamas. And I'm like, and I knew this person, right? And I'm like, you know, this is going in a book. He's like, yeah, is this not okay? I'm like, it's fine. It's totally fine. And then I had another woman who's in the New Yorkers, Marina Press, who arrived at the door at noon in a vintage pink Dior fantastic gown. But wait, then I walked into the living room and she had painted the whole living room pink to match the dress. So to me, you know, that's like spot on. Like anybody that would do that, you know, should
pretty
be on
amazing.
TV. Or yeah, exactly. So I mean, that got even more exaggerated in the California book. But
Oh, okay. Well, hold on to that thought. I'm going to come back to that. But I'm just curious, in fact, about both books. So maybe this is a good transition. Is the indoor portraits are fascinating because they feel like New Yorkers, right? There's a sort of intimacy in these spaces because New Yorkers have their homes, but we also spend a lot of our social time outside our homes because our apartments are small, right? And you can't have dinner parties unless you're fabulously rich and, you know,
exactly.
So, I mean, I think it's sort of really amazing the intimacy that people were both willing to share with you, but also that you captured, you know, that it feels very personal.
Up close and personal.
Yeah. So tell me about the difference between when you're photographing those New Yorkers and you're photographing Californians. Were there cultural differences? Were they more nervous or less nervous, or more revealing or less revealing?
They're just they have a different life. There's a different culture out there. Society is slightly different. Even people that don't really have any money tend to live on the ground in some kind of bungalow. They're not as on the 40th floor like they might have been here, or a 5-story walk up. And I know this sounds like such a cliche, but it is real. I think it's really true. The culture out there going back to the 30s and then the 40s is Hollywood, and it's Schwab's drugstore, all of that mythological stuff, right? So even people who are not even in that world, cab drivers, Uber drivers, that Uber driver, you just don't know one day, like if I got in the Uber and the guy saw my business card and thought I was doing something, he'd like his picture taken too. Just in case, you never know. So yeah, it was definitely different. There was this underlying feeling at every shoot that this just might change their life. They just might get discovered under the shadow of Hollywood,
Wow.
Yeah, it's subtle, but definitely there.
And New Yorkers know they're not going to get discovered.
I don't
We all live under the radar.
It's just different. Listen, it's different. New Yorkers are different. Everybody in New York wants to be discovered too. And they were thrilled to be in the book. But I don't know. There just isn't the TV Hollywood thing, that there is. Like, people really out there were like, how close up am I going to be? Is this my good side or is this my good side? Whereas people here are like, whatever, just I'm sitting over there, take my picture, get out of here.
Right.
Also dogs. I have to say, everybody, you can see Bun here. Say hi to everybody, Bun. Bun came with me on every shoot. And a lot of dogs in New York, but everyone in California almost has a dog. So that was a big thing. They all wanted to have their dog, which I'm always happy to do that too. Might be a new book on dog. Yeah. Anyway.
Absolutely. Well, one of our participants is asking a question about whether anyone ever turned you down, and were you ever surprised by that?
Yeah, I was turned down. Not a lot, but that caught me off guard because it did happen, and I can't right in this moment here think of who it was. But I can remember one person who turned me down, and I was just like, what? Are you kidding? Why would you not want to do this? And then I thought, okay, stop it. They got very nervous.
Yeah.
One fellow who will remain nameless, and his wife, really wanted to be in, but he wanted more than her. And the other thing about these books is, I learned this early on. I wouldn't go and take their photo until they had done the Q&A for me in an email, because I had to write their little bio from what they told me for their life story, right? So this fella had sent me all him and his wife's stuff. And then at the very last minute, like the day before I was going to shoot him, she had a total meltdown and said, what? She's coming in our house and she's going to take up so that was a bit of a catastrophe. I was like, never mind, it doesn't matter. I'll just move on. Yeah. So whoever asked that question, there was a couple of people, but not too much.
Yeah. Did you ever meet people who hadn't volunteered, who kind of inspired you to ask whether they'd be willing to have your?
I hustled people. Absolutely. I'd be at a party and there'd be like somebody really drunk and really interesting or funny. And I'd be like, do you want to be in my book? And they'd be like, yeah, sure. So I would pull out the Q and I'd tape the Q&A right there. And then I'd take their picture and have them sign it. I always had a release form. I mean, listen, I would always go back and make sure they were okay with it. But they were like, what did I say on that thing? I'm like, you were fine. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. Yeah. One of our listeners has said, I'm glad you mentioned the word fun with the portrait images, as it appears that you were having fun and your subjects were so receptive.
Oh, no, it was the most fun I've ever had. Like I'm trying to come up with an excuse to do another one. I don't know.
Oh,
Anyway.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
If someone asks a question about your attraction to old cars, other than whether they're just, is there some reason you were attracted to them? You mentioned that car was important and,
You know, I didn't know I loved old cars until one day in the East Village, I found this old caddy, not that one, a different one, parked in front of the Hells Angels clubhouse. And there was a Hells Angel out hosing down the car. And I'm like on my bike with my dog in the basket and I ride over and he's like, get out of here. And I'm like, oh, please. I begged him, to let me take the picture. And I thought, wow, this car is amazing. And then I got so into it that I had a thing where if anybody in New York spotted a good old car on the street, they got a free print if they texted me and said, hurry up, it's parked over at 4th and B or, whatever it was. And
wow.
I don't know why I feel like in this country anyway, cars tell a story. They place things in a timeline, they tell a personal story. And in a poorer neighborhood, like down in those days, not anymore, down in the Lower East Side, you would find cars from 25 years ago that dad still drove and it was still parked out on the street with the plaid upholstery. You know what I mean? So I love it. And then I started going to California, which is like shooting fish in a barrel in terms of old cars. You just stand on the corner and one better than the next. So I have a big collection of old cars. I mean, I'm thinking maybe that might be a book of just car photos, but yeah, I love them.
Well, maybe with their personalities too. I mean, I think, people, Californians have such a different relationship to their cars because they're so fundamental to your life. You can't really get away without having one. But in New York, I think we have such a love-hate relationship with them because they're in the way but they represent freedom and, they represent the American dream and lots of things like that. So I think we have a much more ambiguous relationship to them here than you got to park them.
I also think in California, they're going to kill me for saying this, but you're really quite judged by your car out there. Like if the car is so symbolic of so much more than it is here, just obviously not for people driving around in Rolls Royces, but I mean, for your average picker, in your average car, that doesn't work out there. You're a bum if you're driving a Honda or whatever the heck it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm curious whether were you ever working on the street photographs and the portraits at the same time, or did you really have to switch hats?
No, I'm always doing everything at the same time. I'd photograph my way there and then I'd go in and photograph them and then I'd photograph my way home. Yeah.
And did anyone ever look at the portraits and say, no way, you can't use this, or did you not? Did you have a release and you just?
Full disclosure, they didn't see the photos.
Oh, interesting.
There was just a couple of people that I felt were so nervous that I just couldn't not show it to them to assure them. But for the most part, no. And also, I want to add to these books, people kind of love to have their picture taken, but the part where they had to tell me about their life, that made them a bit jiggy. They didn't really love that. So I tended to not let them read their bio after I had written it. Because, everybody's a critic. Everyone wants to add, oh, I shouldn't have put Aunt Edna in there. I should have put this, or it just, no. So I made them sign the thing and, I showed them some samples and I said, I will never do anything horrible or embarrassing. I'm not that kind of person, but you got to let me do it,
Right. That's interesting that somehow people's self-description was more nervous making than having their portraits taken. I wonder if it's that we have our pictures taken all the time and we hardly ever write about ourselves anymore.
I don't know. I think, giving the world a photo of yourself on your sofa is one thing. That's intimate enough. But to start telling me or the book or the world, where your parents were born and where you first worked and, where and that was the most fun, I have to say, of both of these books for me, but besides the photos was, there's kind of it's formulaic, you know, the little bio. And one of the most important things is I ask, what are the jobs that you had when you were younger before you arrived at this point? And oh my God, those jobs, one is funnier than the next. And you go, God, we will do anything to pay our rent. It's incredible. Me too. When I had to do my own, right?
Right.
So I think that's just, it gets that makes people scared. It's like, oh my God, nobody knows about that part of my life. Yeah.
Right.
That was a long time ago, whatever.
So what kinds of other questions did you ask? Now I'm fascinated.
Well, like if like I said, they're kind of formulaic. Everybody got the same Q&A. Where were your parents? What year were you born? Where were you born? Did you have siblings? What did your dad and mom do? Just to kind of set the stage for your childhood. And then was there any kooky things about yourself when you were a kid? Some of them were really kooky. And then where did you go to school? How did you get through school? Were you ever married? I mean, it's just really regular questions, but they're pretty darn funny and then the other thing is some people sent me like a 5-page, yeah, exactly, on their life. And I had to give them I had to like 20 sentences in the book. So that was the hardest part, is reading all this really important stuff that this person has given me and then have to, edit it down and have it make sense and clip through what I think are the highlights for the reader, it's challenging.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like it's an interesting skill to have on top of your obviously visual skills to be able to distill someone's life in that way. That's an interesting thing in and of itself.
And you know what? There's a lesson in that for me and everybody who's listening to this. Don't think you can't do something. I was going to hand the book into the publisher, just the photos, right? And the name of the person. And they were like, are you kidding? No, you can't do that. We need a story. It's like, I'm not a writer. I'm like, yeah, you are. Just go, so anybody can do anything really, if you just get going.
And did you feel like your style evolved as you did this more, maybe worked on the second book? Were there other things that you were looking for, or did you feel like you got the Q&A right from the beginning?
Well, the Q&A definitely evolved fairly quickly because as I started to understand important things I'd left out. But my writing style, because I'm not a writer, and I thought, I'm not going to try and be a writer here. That's going to be a joke. I'm just going to write this in a conversational tone like I talk.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that will be the best for the reader.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I did the California book, I wanted that to just stay the same.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
As someone, there's a number of questions about the street photography that I'd like to get to, but I'm going to start with this question, which is, in the age of Instagram and everyone constantly posting photographs, is it difficult to get art portraiture to stand out?
Art portraiture. Are we talking about the portraits now?
Yeah.
What are we talking about?
I think so. Yeah. Sorry, I'm gonna come.
No, that's, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I guess it is. I mean, I think that Instagram, we could do a whole thing on this and we don't want to, but Instagram, in my opinion, is, it's evolving really quickly and I don't really like where it's going. I mean, I'm still on there because I reach people on there, but I don't, the algorithms, I don't really think that many people are even seeing my work anymore. My friends all complain about the same thing. It's okay. I mean, it's been a good run and, but I don't know that that's going to be the thing that's going to take us photographers forward. I don't know that Instagram's that interested in it.
And from this is another question from somebody about street photography. And that is sort of, what's your sense of how it's changed from when you started to today? Does it feel different to you? And do you approach it differently?
The taking of the pictures does not feel different. That I love to do. I could do that every day. Whatever that means to me, to be out there, there's just something about it that's not like anything else. But that said, Like, I'm just going to say what everyone always says every day anyway. I'm not that original, but there's like, everybody has an iPhone. I'm even like half the time, that's what my photos are on now.
Mhm.
And I don't want to carry my big camera around. And if I'm somewhere and that's what I have, they say, what's the best camera? The one you have in your pocket is the best camera. So I don't know though. I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen to us photographers and photography. And now with the introduction of AI, that is also about to change radically, and maybe in a good way and maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, that's clearly going to change the ability to control copyright, I suspect.
Oh
And,
my goodness.
it's going to be a big thing while that all shakes out.
So
No
there's
question
software
about it.
I think you can get already. They say, I don't have it. I should probably get it. That protects your archive from their scraping.
Mhm.
But I think it's too late. I mean, I think they've been doing this already for 2 years when we weren't paying attention or didn't know,
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah. Someone asks, do ordinary people interest you, meaning the standard New Yorker not living on the Lower East Side or thereabouts, not the suits, but some of the old time New Yorkers who just live here
Oh,
and
of
that's all
course.
they know.
Of course. In fact, I went to California for the winter and I'm back, and right now I'm staying on the Upper East Side. And this neighborhood is full of great people who have lived here since 1940, 1945. Some of them are even in their same apartments. And that's where it is. That's what it is. That's the shit, as they say. That's the New Yorker,
Yeah, yeah, exactly. The
Absolutely.
people you run into in your neighborhood and on the subway and yeah,
Absolutely.
definitely.
I hope that I got some of those people in my book. I did the best I could with trying to get everybody in there. I didn't want it to, I mean, it's a bit downtown heavy because that's where I live.
Mhm.
But maybe do
Yeah.
another one uptown. Whatever. Doormen and poodles. That's what's up here.
Some of those doormen are pretty interesting people too.
Oh yeah. If you
yeah.
want to know what's going on, that's where you go. Those guys know every single thing all the time.
Yes, absolutely.
Really.
So someone asks, how does the cultural topography work you do influence your portraiture and vice versa? So I think he's talking about the street photography and the cultural stuff of the street photography versus the in portraiture.
What's the question about the two things?
Yeah, so let me read that to you again. And Carl, if we're getting this wrong, please let us know. How does the cultural topography work you do influence your portraiture and vice versa?
I'm not really getting this question.
Okay, all right. Carl, give us a hand.
That's okay. I mean, all I can say is that when I did the portraits for that book, I was very aware that I didn't want it to be all of this little slice of New York or of that little slice. And I didn't want it to be all of this race or all of this age or, as best I could. I didn't want to be influenced. I wanted to make sure that everybody was represented there,
Right. No, absolutely. And I think certainly from everything I've looked at, you were successful in that regard. So a couple of questions about technical things. Someone's asking about a small camera. Which camera do you use and lens for your street photography? And then someone else asks what kind of post-processing you're using with your photographs.
So when I hurt my back and I was using a big Canon up until that point, which was a beautiful camera, but I couldn't carry it anymore. And I bought a little Sony RX100. So it was like the size of a pack of cigarettes. And I love that camera and I used it for years until I could start to get back with a, bigger camera. But the problem was with that little camera in the end, I can sometimes do really large photos, like the Bernaducci Mizell show I had was all 6-foot photos. Hard to get those out of that little sensor. So you're kind of limited in that way. But that little camera saved my life. And now, then I switched as I got better. I got I stayed with Sony and I did an A7R. I did 3 of those. And I still love my Sony. And now I have just got, I know this sounds like all I do is buy cameras. I really don't. But I got a Leica, the new Q. And that's kind of much smaller than the Sony. So it's a little easier to take everywhere, even though it only has a fixed 28 lens. So it's a bit limiting.
Mhm.
But so I'm just kind of.
And what about post-production? Tell us about that.
I try really hard not to do too much. It just, and I think probably years ago when we were all like, woo, you look what you can do with everything, we were all doing a bit too much. And then one day I looked and I went, oh my God, turn this down, get rid of all that stuff. It doesn't wear well. It's hideous. And so now I, maybe 5 minutes on a photo, maybe adjust the contrast, maybe the light and maybe the color a little bit, turn it up, turn it down. But I don't like to, if I have to start spending 10, 15, 20, half an hour on a photo, go get another photo.
Yeah.
There's a million out there,
Yep.
Yeah.
Someone's asked whether all of your New York photography is urban settings or whether you also.
No. I photograph everywhere I go. I have beautiful photos from upstate. I have friends up in the country, and if I get up there in the summer, oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yes, and New York has some pretty amazing nature too in our parks and our natural areas. Someone is asking whether you've ever photographed in Canada. It sounds like the answer to that might be yes. During your career.
I mean, my father gave me a camera when I was 14. He was a, weekend photographer, and he got a new camera and gave me that camera. And so I've always taken photos, whatever that means.
Mm-hmm.
And I took I started college in Toronto with a photo minor. So I was photographing then too. Yeah.
Yeah. And did you ever work in black and white? That occurs to me. Because you're so color oriented. I
have some black and white. When I was young, especially when I was in school and we were doing all our darkroom before the internet, how old am I? We were in the darkroom getting lung cancer by breathing in all those toxic chemicals. I had a lot of black and white stuff there. And my early, like 1983, 84 stuff was film in the East Village was all black and white too.
Yeah.
But even, now I sometimes every once in a while I'll get let's just do this in black and white. You can change it over to black and white and look at it. And as much as I like it, just never like it quite as much as I like it in color.
Yeah. I think that's the painter in you.
Yeah, it totally is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because in each of those images, there's many of the images that stick in my head are the ones, that amazing caddy. But even the images of that woman in silhouette, I mean, the striking
out my window.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The distinctions between her image and that yellow sort of frame of her and the subtleties in the darkness is, very much a color eye too, I think.
I can't even imagine those out my window in black and white. I think something would be lost there. But I moved into that apartment in 1999. And I just moved out last year. So it's 23 years there. That was my view from my bedroom window. And, if you take pictures, you just can't stop taking pictures. And I have pictures going back to 1999 of the same view. And it's just fantastic to look at what it looked like then. And the tree just gets bigger and bigger. And then finally the tree got so big, I moved out. It was like, there's no more view here. I have to go now. Start something.
Yeah. Someone is asking, in your street photography, do you approach people you're photographing and do you talk to them first?
Never. ever.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, it's been really interesting to all the people that we who do, obviously we exhibit a lot of street photography and given our theme, but really seriously divided between people who just, want to be as invisible as they can to the people that they're taking photographs of, and those who absolutely engage in conversation, that's part of their practice, right? And it's a fascinating.
Depends what you're doing out there. I mean, that fellow that did the Humans of New York,
Mhm. Yeah.
his whole thing was those long stories about those people. So he had to
Yeah.
really, he had that was like the outside version of my books. You know what I mean? I went inside and had those conversations with people, but no, not on the street. I'm not. Also, I don't really do that much street portraiture per se.
Mhm. Yeah.
That would be different. Then I would have to say, but
Yeah. Well, in many of your street photography images that have people in them and there's a lot of them, they're also very intimate, right? They're someone having a moment with someone else or themselves in a pause in their day. I'm thinking of that woman sitting on the stoop. It's a quiet contemplative moment that she's having, and I think if you talk to her, it wouldn't be the same image,
no, 100% correct. It would not be.
Yeah, it's kind of intimacy of that moment that she's having that you captured that is
Well,
so
I like to
special.
think that, something like that, there's a story there. Like photography to me is all about stories for me. And, you can have your own story, but there is a story there of her sitting on that stoop by herself on the phone or whatever she's doing. And if I start talking to her, that's a different story now.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. So many people, including me, want to know what that next project is going to be. So you've speculated a little.
I don't know. I have, there's just not enough time to do what I would like to do. I'd like to do a book on the cars. I'd like to do a book before I die of my street work and get a nice, collection of that. I'd love to do another portraits of people maybe down in Florida or I don't know where, some New Orleans, but I have to, I can't do it by myself. Like I have to get a publisher, books are a big epic project. So I'm just starting that now. I have a couple, I sent some packages out last week to publishers to see if I can get them on board.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does it help that you've already done 2 books with a particular publisher, or does that not count anymore?
I sure hope so.
All right. Well, we will send good wishes into the universe for that. Yes. Yeah. And so I'm curious about what artists have influenced your work, whether that's painting or photography, the portraits or the street photography. Who is it that you look at that has influenced your work? And then I'm interested in other people whose work you really admire, but is really different and you haven't incorporated into your own work.
Well, I think there is a single photo that affected me more than anybody's whole life's work, and that is the Sword Swallower by Diane Arbus. I don't know if you know that photo.
I do.
But when I first looked at that photo, I gasped. I can't even explain it. It was visceral. I didn't know if I wanted to throw up or if I wanted to, I don't know. I was like, holy bleep. Yeah. This is what a photo can be. Like I was young and I didn't know anything about anything. And I thought that made me understand that there's no boundaries here. Like I can shoot anything I want as long as I'm good at it, And so that really got me going on a very particular, and also Helen Levitt. As quaint, and I mean, her stuff is like really old now, but it just holds up. I mean, I wish that it's one of my regrets in life that I never got to meet her. And also, you know, she was shooting at a time when you could shoot children. You know, you can't really, it's very difficult now to shoot kids. And I understand, you know, why. But yeah, Helen Levitt and then also for the portraits, and this is going to be kind of weird, but Alice Neal, who's a painter, not a photographer, but there's just something nutty about Alice Neal's portraiture that I thought, I want to get that nuttiness, that whatever that is in my photographs. And I'm sure I didn't, but it was something I was trying to do. Yeah.
Well, I think as soon as you said that, some of her work popped up in my head. So maybe you did.
Yeah, I'm just such
Yeah.
a fan of her portraiture. And anyway,
Mhm.
so and also, you know, let's see, who else? William Eggleston.
Mhm.
I mean, I could sit all day and look at his photos, you know, color. He didn't get that much kudos back in the days because they were color, but of course now he's the reigning king of it all. And Joel Meyerowitz too, for a contemporary. Joel's amazing.
Mhm.
You know, some of that stuff that he scooped up in the 70s and 80s is like hands down. You got to bow down sometimes.
Absolutely. I'm a huge fan myself. So
Are you? Yeah.
I completely understand. Yeah.
Yeah.
I fell in love with his work when he was photographing on the Cape, I guess.
Oh, those Cape photos are just to die for.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree.
One of our participants says, Alice Neal, perfect. I think you did capture that, and
Thank
probably
you.
some of the same people.
Thank you. Whoever
Yeah.
you are, I thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm curious about, you mentioned that you often do this work very large, and I'm interested in what you know as a photographer, and how you think people relate differently to the large images and to the small images.
Well, let me just say to start, my friends think I'm out of my mind for doing these giant things, right? But I myself, I like to walk into a room. I don't care if it's a painting or a photo, whatever it is. I want to be dwarfed by the art. I don't want to feel like I'm the most important person in that room. I like to be like, oh my God, you know, look at this. And then sometimes larger gives you that, right? So, and depending on the person, some people buy really big art if they have the money in the room and they like that. It just becomes a different thing. You know, I mean, I also like little tiny paintings and little tiny photos too. But I had last year, maybe the year before that, there was a new hotel opening up in Palm Springs, the Hall Hotels, and they do art hotels, which is really groovy. And they commissioned some images for me for the rooms and stuff. And they're going to be 6 feet, like, and they did them all giant. So I can't
Wow.
wait for that. Yeah, that's going to be really fun.
Yeah.
They're either going to give people nightmares or, you know, they're going to.
Or they've got to be really big rooms.
Yeah, well, I don't know if anything is a really big room in a hotel anymore, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
So
No, it's so fun to see hotels really using real art now.
most of them don't, but it is
Yeah.
nice when you see it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
When we can afford to stay on them, right?
Yeah, that too.
Yeah. And so I'm curious whether the work that you've been doing with the Museum of City of New York, those 2 exhibitions that you were in were very ambitious and very fun to see as a viewer. And I'm just curious about the curators who've have they influenced your work, or do you feel like your work influences them more?
No, the curator just never influenced my work. That's backwards. But the person at the Museum of the City of New York, Sean Corcoran,
Hmm.
I have to give him a shout out. You know, not only has he really helped me just by including me and giving me a place there, you know, he helps so many. Like he has really changing that museum in the years that he's been there. He's really making photography a very important thing there. And I
Yes.
was just lucky he included me, you know, in 2 of those shows. And the portraits from the New Yorker book, which I said came out during COVID, it was kind of a, you know, weird thing. He did that at home show. So my work was just so perfect for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a very generous soul.
Oh, he's just a fantastic person, really. Lucky to know him.
Yes, absolutely. We're all lucky to see his work too.
Yeah.
In those fabulous exhibits that he does.
Yeah.
No question about it.
Yeah.
Let me just check and see whether we have any more questions.
3 minutes.
Yeah.
No stress.
As many as I can, yeah. Does meeting the person first then inspire you to photograph them? I think I may have asked you that question.
No,
So.
no. In fact, there was lots of people I never met. We only had a back
Who
and
you
forth
photographed?
email. I got the bio stuff and then boom, I just arrived. So God bless all those people. I mean, they were really taking a chance too. I could have been a total nut and, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the thing that's really interesting, obviously you selected, I assume you chose the ones, but people's settings, which is part of the reason we were so interested in these portraits, so much reflect themselves, you know.
Oh,
and the
100%.
fact that you walked into these places not knowing, you know, who you were meeting and what environment they had created for themselves is fascinating.
That was the fun of it all.
Yeah, no, I bet. How many of the people that you actually ended up in the book are people you really didn't know before you went to
Oh,
photograph?
most.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
I would say 3/4 I didn't know. And also, you know, the book had 80, around 80 people in it. I shot at 200.
Mhm.
And the publisher, you know, had to edit it down and you can only put so
Yes.
many book. And they were all fantastic, but it was like too many yellow kitchens, too many 40-year-old, you know, whatever. So that stuff, it is a book and that stuff comes into play.
Right. No,
But
absolutely. Well, a book is an exhibition too, right?
yeah,
And the order
totally.
of things matters, and
Mhm.
the way the reader or the viewer views the book and the sequencing of the images is just as important as in an exhibition.
Mhm.
Yeah, no question about it.
I
I'm always
got
surprised.
to do the sequencing myself.
Great.
Yes, with my dear friend Claire Jeffries. She's like my editor and, you know, move all the furniture. And I printed out every image. We put them on the floor and we just kept moving everything around until we thought we had.
Wow, it
Yeah.
felt right.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Sally. This has been a very fun conversation. It's really fun to talk to you about your work and really think about it more deeply. I really appreciate your coming, and I think all of us will never forget falling in love with Moon on a garbage bag ever again. So we're going to all have to quote you forever about that. So thank you again.
Well,
I'd also like to thank, our absolute pleasure. I would also like to thank the MAS staff who helped us coordinate today's program. Jen and Genevieve, of course, always deliver an amazing program, and thank you both. Thanks to all of you who joined us today, and a special thanks to MAS members. If you're not a member and enjoyed today's program, we hope you'll consider joining. Your membership supports MAS programs and advocacy towards a more livable city. See the chat for more information about how to support MAS. And I hope you'll spend part of your summer with us. Stay tuned for details on upcoming programs. Next week, we're going to open up our nominations for the 2024 Masterworks Awards. These annual awards celebrate excellence in architecture and urban design across the 5 boroughs. Details will be announced soon. And on Wednesday, June 26th, join us at Housing Works Bookstore for a conversation with Professor Terry Williams on his recent publication, Life Underground. RSVPs will be open soon. This summer will be full of other exciting programs and tours, so keep your eye on your inbox and follow us on social media channels for upcoming announcements. And once again, thank you for joining us today. And don't forget that Sally's exhibition is up for a few more days, and please, and this conversation will definitely inform another viewing, I hope. And please enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you, Sally, and thank you to all of you.
Thank you.